Okay, the top left indicator is the airspeed indicator. It gives us information on our airspeed as we're flying through the air. It's calibrated in both knots and miles per hour. The gauge next to that is a directional gyro, and that gives us information as to what direction we're heading in the air, north, south, east, or west, or some variation in between. The gauge next to that is the artificial horizon. That gives us information on our attitude as it relates to the horizon, whether we are climbing, descending, turning, or even upside down. The gauge next to that is the VOR, which is a navigational gauge, and there are VORs posted all around the country, and generally what we do is turn our radios to the VOR frequency and fly from one VOR to the next. That's how we get around the skies. The bottom leftmost gauge is our altimeter, and that tells us how high we are above the ground. The gauge next to that is the turn coordinator, and it lets us know whether or not our turns are coordinated as opposed to skidding or sliding through a turn. We want the airplane to be in a coordinated movement. The gauge next to that is our vertical speed indicator. It tells us how fast we are climbing or descending. In this particular airplane, you pretty much want to keep your descents around 500 feet per minute. And also your assets, you want to keep them about 500 feet per minute. The gauge next to that is another VOR. This airplane has dual radios, and in case you lose one, you have the other as a backup. Okay, going across the panel, the top left gauge is our RPM indicator, and it lets us know how fast the engine is turning. Try to keep it around 2,450 RPMs. Underneath that are 4 gauges. We have 2 fuel gauges. There's two fuel tanks in this airplane, one for the left tank and one for the right tank. The 2 gauges in the middle are oil pressure and temperature gauges. We want to make sure that the oil pressure is right and the oil temperature is right. If the oil pressure or oil temperature in this airplane is not where it should be, not in the green, it could result in an engine seizure. One does need to know math, not high functioning math, but you certainly do need to know about adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Science doesn't hurt. Knowing, or at least having the desire to know how things work or why things work is good, because you do need to know weather. You do need to know the performance of your airplane given the length of a runway and the temperature outside. Will my airplane with full fuel or full passengers actually make it off the runway? So you do kind of need to know those things.